Okay. Ready?
Yep, go ahead.
Okay, welcome to the workshop, March 4th, 2022 workshop. It's an overview of the MS4 permitting and modifications to Chapter 13 of the City Code. It looks like the agenda is number one, presentation by Tom Cobb and West Bay and Gene McDonald. And then the number two is questions. Three is next steps by West Bay. And the fourth is adjourned. So, Tom, so I take over, sir.
Thank you, President Roybal. Sorry, I think we've got the sirens going off. Hopefully it's not too distracting. I really appreciate everyone's time, members of the council and you, sir. But, I think you've had a long week and we all have, so we'll try to be as brief as we can. But I just want to emphasize how important this is. And it really is not something that we look at every day, but it is an extremely important component of the part of my job in the city. So my little agenda, as you indicated, I just want to introduce my team, and obviously they've been pre-introduced, but I've got West Bay, Deputy City Engineer, with me, as well as Gene McDonald, and he's been hired as an on-contract basis to be my drainage engineer, and he's been invaluable in helping me through this process. I'm going to talk a little bit about what is an MS4, and then we're going to have Gene talk into why is this update required, and a little bit more on the summary of the key updates. And then, as indicated, we'll have Wes do what are the next steps. I'm going to come back with a little bit of summary, and then we'll do the questions. Didn't mean to kind of change the agenda on you, but we kind of thought this might be the easiest way for it to go. So what is an MS4? So background is the Federal Clean Water Act in 1972 was amended. And at that point, the discharge of any pollutants to the surface water of the US were then said to had to be regulated. That's under the National Pollutant Discharge Elimination System, or NPDES permit. The Clean Water Act gave authority then to primacy for the issuance of those permits to the states. So Wyoming didn't actually obtain primacy until 1974. And that program, the Wyoming program, is administered under the Wyoming Department of Environmental Quality, or WYDEQ, and then it's under the Wyoming Pollutant Discharge Elimination System, and you've heard WIPD. So those were all those terms they come from. A little bit of background still again in Section 402P was added to the Clean Water Act in 1987 by Congress, and it established two phases for addressing stormwater discharges under the NPDES program. Phase one was published by the EPA in 1990, and it was for populations over 100,000. And then phase two came in 1999, and this is where we came into this and got dragged into the new regulations. And it said certain regulated small MS4s with populations less than 100,000. Well, Wyoming has two particular regulated urbanized areas. One, of course, is the city of Cheyenne. That includes Warren Air Force Base and Laramie County overall. And then the city of Casper, which includes the town of Mills, the town of Evansville, and the Trona County. So MS4, and this is where the acronym comes for, is Municipal Separate Storm Sewer System, hence M and 4 S's. The MS4 is the system of infrastructure and conveyance components used to collect and transport stormwater runoff. And the NPDES MS4 permit is basically for discharges of stormwater into the surface waters from publicly owned and / operated stormwater collection systems. And obviously the city of Cheyenne has an MS4 that's issued by the DEQ under the EPA oversight. That's an important element to understand, that the EPA is the regulator, then that primacy effect goes to the state. But again, it really is the EPA that's governing all this. So what infrastructure is considered? So they consider it pipes, manholes, inlets, catch basins, swales, ditches, and this is on the left here, man-made channels, streets, curb and gutters, outfalls, and detention facilities. And just to give you a perspective on what we have in our, I guess, catalog, for storm sewer right now, we have about 135 miles of piping. I've got 4,119 inlets and catch basins, about 1,659 manholes, 236 outfall locations. This is everywhere that they discharge into the creeks, for instance, Dry Creek, Allison Draw, all of those basins, all of those pieces that get dumped into the creek areas, that's those outfalls. And right now I've got 160 acres of stormwater detention, And then roadways are alone, which are considered part of this conveyance system, got about 364 miles of streets, 14 million square feet of sidewalk, and 800 miles of curb and gutter. And as you all know, this has continued to grow. So it's not stopping. The requirements. So we have to, as a part of our permit, we have to implement a comprehensive stormwater management plan. That's the SWAMP, SWMP. We have to document the program implementation. We have to report annually to DEQ. And we obtain a new permit about every 5 years. And as part of that permit, then there are 6 minimum control measures or program areas that we have to look at. Those are, number 1 is public education and outreach. Number 2 is public participation and involvement. Number 3, detection and elimination. Number 4 is construction site stormwater runoff control. 5 is post-construction stormwater management in new development and redevelopment areas. And number 6 is pollution prevention and good housekeeping for our municipal operations. With that, I'm going to pass it over to Gene, and he's going to talk a little bit more about the actual updates.
Well, thanks, Tom, and President Roybal and fellow council members. I'm just going to try to give you an explanation of why this update is required at this time. And I would also like to point out that our particular stormwater management program covers not just the city of Cheyenne, but it also covers parts of Laramie County and then some areas within the urbanized Cheyenne area that are controlled by the Wyoming Department of Transportation. So the 3 entities fall under what's known as the general permit co-permittee approach. And that's how we go about obtaining our NPDES permit coverage under the Stormwater Phase 2 final rule. So as Tom pointed out, again, we're completely under the Phase 2 rule of the Clean Water Act, which I believe was instituted in the late 90s, 1999, I believe is the date. And so that affects populations, generally speaking, of 50,000 or more. So here in Wyoming, it has an impact on the communities of Cheyenne and Casper. And so our authorization to discharge stormwater is provided under what Tom referenced as the WIPDES permit. Otherwise, we can't legally discharge stormwater into the receiving waters of Crow Creek. So this is what allows us to do that. So generally speaking, the state of Wyoming has a 5-year cycle for when they are updating their WIPDES permit. Currently, they're operating under an administrative continuation, and I believe that their schedule for completing the updates for the WIPDES permit will probably be towards the end of this year. So we're actually proactively trying to update our stormwater management program so that it aligns with the updates in the WIPDES permit, the new one that'll come out later in this year. And we've been in close coordination with the DEQ for about 12 months now, as we go through all of the updates that they'd like to see in the swamp. And the biggest one is going to revolve around this new ordinance that we'd like to bring to your attention as a part of the revision in the new WIPDES permit, again, later in the year. They are going to require both Casper and Cheyenne to take over enforcement of the permit compliance activities that are within our plans, our programs. So Casper's already done that. And in fact, the ordinance that we'll be presenting to you is really the boilerplate from the city of Casper, and we're going to tailor it to Cheyenne. It's already been approved by the DEQ, and they're in favor of us just adopting that wholesale. So in essence, that's what we're going to be doing. But again, it's going to be tailored to the community of Cheyenne. Okay, you can go to the next slide, Tom. So what's in this stormwater management plan are basically 6 minimum control measures. And then within each one of those minimum control measures, we're going to have a suite of what we commonly refer to as best management practices, or BMPs. The DEQ will have an active role in partnership with city staff in making sure that the selected BMPs are appropriate and that they truly do allow the city full compliance underneath under the Clean Water Act. So this first one that you're seeing is the public education and outreach minimum control standard, or measure, I should say. This one revolves around public education and outreach, generally speaking. And the whole purpose for the first minimum control measure is to encourage the public, your constituents, to support and embrace what's in our stormwater management program. So the items off to the right of the screen, and I apologize for the small font, but we'll make sure that everybody gets a copy of this. And obviously, you're going to get a copy of the actual plan that we're putting together, so you'll be able to review all of this. But those just show you some of the suite of items that are contained in what we're going to pursue in terms of BMPs. And the items that are highlighted in red, those reflect the changes or updates that we're proposing to the DEQ. For this initial minimum control measure, the changes are somewhat negligible and really don't amount to a whole lot. But I should point out that on an annual basis, we are obligated to do a report to the DEQ that basically covers our efforts for the preceding year. And so we're constantly on an annual basis coordinating with the DEQ to make sure that our BMPs are working, that they're efficient. If we decide that something isn't really doing what we thought it would do, we have the option on an annual basis to basically change those out and go to something that hopefully will do a better job. So that's what we're showing on the right. Next slide, Tom. So the minimum control measure, the second one, revolves around public participation and public involvement. So the purpose of this minimum control measure is, again, to encourage the public, your constituents, to actively be involved in some of the things that we do as a part of our stormwater management program. We actually have the Conservation District under contract. Again, we've done this for years with them, for about the first 12 years of our stormwater management program. We had the Conservation District assisting us with this part of our plan. And they're on contract again, or under contract again, to provide that assistance. So they're going to give us an assist with just providing some good educational efforts and potentially some participation as well for the public. And Conservation District has a trailer that they'll take around to the community to kind of show folks what happens to stormwater, where it goes, how it can impact the receiving water, which in this case is Crow Creek. So they've been great to work with. We're going to continue that relationship, and it's very cost effective for the city as well. Next slide, Tom. So now we'll get into some of the beef of what we really want to bring to your attention. The third minimum control measure revolves around illicit discharge detection and elimination. This one's a big one, and this is really the most significant change that's coming down the pike with the revisions to the WIPD's permit. So what we'll need to start doing with this minimum control measure is we actually need to provide enforcement. And the only way we can do that is to do it under an adopted ordinance by the governing body, and then that's going to give the authority to the construction inspectors under the city engineer to actually enforce the provisions that are in our stormwater management program. So this is one of the more important minimum control measures. It's one that certainly the DEQ takes very seriously. We have done a really good job in the past on this particular minimum control measure. And we've done a lot of things such as periodically cammering the storm drainage lines to see if there's any illicit connections, or to determine if we have any issues with potential contaminants that are getting into the storm sewer system. So those are things that we've done in the past. We'll need to continue to do those types of things in the future. But now, in addition to that, we're going to have to bring a whole new enforcement element to bear. So on the right, again, what you're going to see are some of the BMPs that we have been doing, some of the new ones in red, and the ones that are highlighted in yellow. Those directly relate to this new enforcement ordinance that we'll have to have for compliance under the new WIPD's permit. And we can go to the next slide, Tom. So the fourth minimum control measure in our stormwater management program revolves around construction site stormwater runoff control. This is a big one. It's historically been critical for us. I think we do a fairly good job at it. But in the past, when we've had issues on construction sites, what our construction inspectors would do is note the non-compliance and then coordinate with the DEQ inspectors to go out and enforce the issue so that the contractor is in full compliance with the Clean Water Act. Going forward, we're going to have to take over that role. So the things, again, that you see highlighted in yellow have a direct relationship to this new ordinance and how it allows our inspectors to basically ensure that all of our contractors within the Cheyenne urbanized area are coming up with a good, compliant erosion control plan that meets the requirements of the Clean Water Act, and then going out and making sure that the contractors are doing what they said they were going to do. So our inspectors right now are generally out on construction sites on a regular basis. Wes and Tom can speak to this in terms of how often they're out on sites, but they do inspect the sites as they're under construction. This will be an added layer that they'll need to do. And again, it's a requirement coming out of the Clean Water Act, out of the Phase 2 rule. And I don't believe we have any flexibility whatsoever. We're going to have to comply with this. And again, I would point out that Casper's already doing it, and the DEQ is now requesting that Cheyenne do it as well. Next slide, Tom. So now this is the fifth minimum control measure of the 6 that are contained within our stormwater management program. This one has to do with post-construction stormwater runoff control. So not only are we obligated to make sure that construction sites, when they're under construction, are in full compliance with the Clean Water Act, but we also need to ensure that once everything's built out, that we have permanent facilities that will provide that necessary water quality control element so that we're not contributing contaminants to our receiving waters and ultimately to the waters of the U.S. and Crow Creek. So again, the highlighted area is just reflecting this added level of compliance effort that we're going to have to do under the new enforcement ordinance. I noticed that Dr. Aldridge asked whether we're going to have to increase the amount of inspectors. I think Tom and Wes need to kind of get their arms around that yet. Potentially, I think we have enough, but there is going to be an added level of work that needs to be done. And we'll probably have to have an additional conversation with the governing body budgeting.
Gene, can I go ahead and introduce for a second? I did respond in the chat. I don't mean to interrupt your mojo here, but Dr. Aldrich, the answer, and through you, President Roybal, obviously, we are in the process of requesting additional inspectors, but this would just fulfill us up to what would be full staff. Right now, we're short. We're down one, and we're looking for another junior inspector. So it really is just getting back to full staff. I'm sorry to interrupt.
No, thank you, Tom. Thank you for clarifying that. And it allowed me to have my choking fit after I drank my coffee and it went down the wrong way. So let's go to the next slide. So this is, yeah, just go to the next one. This is the sixth and final minimum control measure that's a requirement of our stormwater management program. This one revolves around pollution prevention and just good housekeeping for our municipal operations. And you'll notice on the right that we don't have anything in red. And that's because we've actually been doing a pretty good job on this element of our swamp. The Public Works Director and Public Works generally has been doing a pretty good job about making sure that they're doing things in compliance with the Clean Water Act. Later in the year, Director Nemenchik will have to update all of her individual stormwater pollution prevention plans for all of her facilities. But I think she's already on top of that. So that'll be another aspect of our overall update. But certainly we've been doing this part of the stormwater management program pretty well. And so we're not seeing really anything to update for this particular minimum control measure. Again, the biggest or most significant thing that we're seeing with the updates to the WIPD's permit, which we should have at some point later in the year, is the enforcement activity that the city of Cheyenne will be required to provide. And again, that the only way that we can do that is under the authority of a adopted ordinance by the governing body. So again, that's really the huge reason why we wanted to bring this to your attention. And I believe Tom will go into this in just a slide or two here. But we are under the gun a little bit in terms of scheduling to try to keep this moving and get this update to the Wyoming DEQ for their final review and approval. Originally, our initial schedule saw us having all of this completed by February of 2022. Both the DEQ and the city attorney's office have had some changes in staff, so we're a little bit behind on that. We're still in great coordination with the DEQ, but we do want to keep this moving and try to get this completed as soon as we can. So with that, I'm going to hand the baton over to Mr. Bay, and he's going to just review what the next steps are in the process.
Thanks, Gene. So this might seem like a little bit of information overload, but we'll keep you well informed during the process. And if anyone has any questions, don't hesitate to reach out to us. So what are the next steps in this process? The first step is we need to complete the ordinance review. And this is just going to be a collaboration between the engineer's office and the attorney's office. Our goal is to have this completed by the end of March. After we get a quasi-final ordinance completed, we want to open it up to public review and comment. And in particular, we want to get feedback from developers and contractors because they're going to be affected by this enforcement ordinance. After we evaluate those comments, we'll be bringing the ordinance in front of you, the governing body, for approval and adoption to city code. Our goal is to have this finished by the end of June. After we've adopted the ordinance, we have to submit the swamp that includes the ordinance to the DEQ for approval. Our goal is to have this done by the end of August. So with the new swamp that includes a new enforcement ordinance, we're going to have to provide education to the city, in particular, the engineering department and our construction staff. So we will be providing training to construction staff and city engineering department. And also we're going to open this up to the developers and contractors. We want everyone to start out on the same page with this enforcement ordinance. And we're going to be completing that this winter. So ongoing permit compliance. This MS4 permit is not going to go away, and it's something that we're going to have to work at on an annual basis. With that said, we are required to provide annual reports to the DEQ demonstrating how we're meeting those 6 minimum control measures. We'll receive feedback from the DEQ on this and possibly modify our BMPs, our best management practices, tweaks to the swamp itself. Ongoing record keeping related to our MS4 drainage issues and drainage concerns. And like was stated earlier, the swamp has to be reviewed and reapproved every 5 years by the DEQ. So that's where the annual reports are critical, because if we can work on this on an annual basis, it will streamline the reapproval process with the DEQ. And with that, Tom said he had a few more things to say. Thank you.
Thanks, Wes. I'm just going to close the window here a little bit and kind of talk about this as a summary. And obviously, the most important element is I need your assistance to finalize and adopt the Chapter 13 revisions as quickly as we can. And we know that it's an emergency on our part, is not an emergency on yours, but I'm hoping that we can be able to get this passed as soon as we can, because obviously it is an important element. As Gene had talked about, we've had some with DEQ, their complete staff had completely changed. Basically, it was in 19, they came in and did an inspection with the city. So here's the truth, and this is that my predecessors, there were some issues. We received the notice of violation, and that was right when I about walked in the door, right after you had confirmed me as city engineer. A letter showed up on my desk that we were under notice of violation from the DEQ. And what we were in trouble for was basically 4 or 5 items. Some were minor housekeeping items. But the biggest thing, and as Wes alluded to a minute ago, and also Gene, is the annual reporting, okay? What was not happening is the city was not furnishing annual reports to DEQ. And that is what our main part of our NOV was related to. So as we move forward, and now that I'm in this position, we have coordinated with DEQ regularly. We've met regularly with the staff and how we can make these improvements and move this ordinance forward. And just as an important element of this, and I think they both alluded to it before, the Wyoming DEQ can request modifications at any time during that annual review. So when we submit those reports, they can make suggestions and say we want to do it. But again, it's more of a collaborative process. And as we move forward in the future, I think we've mended some fences, so to speak, and we're now on the same page. So I don't think this is going to be nearly as heavy a lift as the coming years go on. But obviously, if we don't comply with these regulations, and if there is on our part, it can result in further enforcement actions, including fines. So this is where I guess the rubber meets the road, so to speak. And again, as we move forward, I'm hoping that we don't have anything like this in the future, and we can only move on from where we are today. And like I said, I think we've mended some of those fences. And with that, I certainly appreciate your time. Want to go ahead, and if you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer, or any on the team. Thank you.
Any other committee have any questions for any of the engineers?
Mr. President,
Go ahead.
this is Mayor Collins. I just have a couple questions. One thing I'm not clear on is, I know the DEQ wants us to do this, but are we required to do this? Do we have any option?
President Robo, through you to Mayor Collins. Mayor, we don't have a choice. I think at the beginning, what it needs to be stated is that this is obviously EPA governed, and the instrument of the EPA is the DEQ, but they're not giving us a choice.
Well, I appreciate that we have to control the drainage, but as far as the enforcement and things, is that also a requirement now that they're delegating that to us and we have no choice but to accept it?
President Robo, through you to Mayor Collins, sir. Yeah, yes, sir. I don't think we have a choice.
Okay. When it comes to staffing, if we start a surface or stormwater drainage mitigation program, as we've been talking about doing, could we put the inspectors for that in that department?
Council, yes, President Robo, through you to Mayor Collins again. Yeah, yes, sir. We can do that. But I think right now, you know, we've got a pretty easy lift. We could keep it within the construction staff. I mean, it's going to be obviously as we move forward, as we get more projects, we may have to look at increasing that staff load. But as we currently see it, based on what we know for the projections for the next couple of years, Mr. Klon and I feel that I think we can move this forward. It's a matter of checklists and just making sure that they do that when they're already out there. They spend quite a bit of time in the field already. It's another element of this, and they're doing it already. They're not ignoring this. In fact, Greg Saline, one of our inspectors, obviously he's been sort of our police force in behind the scenes. He's caught many things and actually gotten DEQ on several projects that weren't complying. So it's stuff we're doing already. But as we move forward, if there is more staffing requirements, we'll have to look at it then.
Last question is, I know with the Clean Water Act and DEQ and EPA, when people violate that, the consequences can be pretty gruesome. With the municipal, I think we're limited to $750. And so I'm not sure that that's going to be enough to really make people very afraid of us. Is there a way that those things can be different because we're doing EPA rules, that the consequences can be different?
President Robo, through you again to Mayor Collins. Mayor, I think as I work through, you know, as we said, we have to coordinate with the attorney's office. These are one of the questions that I had as well. So I don't have a specific answer on this yet, but before the ordinance comes in front of you again, we'll have that answer.
All right, thank you, guys.
Hey, thank you. Dr. Aldridge, did you have a question?
I'm anticipating, and I'm guessing that your budget request as we move forward will reflect the increase items or the budget necessary to accommodate these requirements. Is that correct?
President Robo, through you to Dr. Aldridge. Yes, in fact, I already, in preparation of this, Dr. Aldridge, I already included in last year's budget, for instance, the training and that they both had talked about before. That was already included. We've already got a consultant on board. So that's already moved forward. And then obviously getting Gene on board here to help us. That was also in my budget. But as you'll see forward, you're not going to see many changes because again, I already had accounted for it in last year's budget.
And as a follow-up question, I just wondered if in working with DEQ and working with all of the agencies that are involved in water runoff and environmental quality, is there any flexibility or allowance for rolling these out over a period of time versus having to meet all the requirements on a specific date?
Tom, I can handle that if you want.
Yeah, thank you, President Robo. I'm going to turn it over to Gene here. Go ahead, Gene.
President Roybal, through you to Dr. Eldridge. The short answer is yes. And we've actually done that in years past with the DEQ, and they've been great to work with. So to the extent that we can phase things in, that's always our path forward.
Thank you.
Any further questions from committee? Further questions? Okay. Yes, sir.
I just think we have Dr. Rennie. Dr. Rennie, you can unmute yourself. Do you have any questions? I think we're good.
Okay. And I've got a couple of questions for Gene. We talked about your part of that is illegal discharge, and you've been around the city water system for a few days. Do we have anything that was like historic discharge that we've caught in the past, or do we have anything that's working right now on an illegal discharge?
President Roybal, we have had issues within the last 7 or 8 years even, where we've discovered illicit connections. There were at least 2 or 3 of them in the lower capital basin, so the downtown system. And those were basically archaic connections. I think for the most part, there might have been one that was fairly new and just a mistake on how it was connected into the storm sewer. But we typically will find those types of things when we camera the lines, which we are proposing to do going forward. And this would be a great follow-up on Dr. Aldridge's last question as well. We don't camera everything all at once. So we'll pick a portion of the system each year, and then that's what we camera. If we find illicit connections, then those are generally addressed immediately. The other issue that we have, and this one is much harder to deal with, as Tom pointed out, we've got like 135 linear miles of storm drain system. And so all of the connections on those pipes, it was never built to eliminate the inflow of water from outside of the pipe. And so that can happen as we get large storm events, we get water rolling through the storm sewer system. It can create a condition where water adjacent to the pipe is actually pulled into the storm sewer system, and to the degree that that has contaminants in it, we're going to see that coming out in our outfalls. And so we do have the Conservation District now under contract to also give us an assist with actual sampling in Crow Creek. And we've identified, I think it's 8 locations where we'd like the district to do sampling for us. And that's going to really help Tom and his staff try to determine where we may have issues, where it makes sense to camera lines, where we should be, doing our detective work to figure out, well, is it an illicit connection or is it something else? And then how do we go about remedying the situation, correcting it? So did that answer your question, President Roybal?
It did. So thank you. Any further questions from committee?
President,
Yes, sir.
this is Pete Laybourne. I was curious in terms of that enforcement capability of the DEQ. Where are we at with the rehabilitation of the pump house wetlands, and when can we expect that to happen?
President Robo, through you to Councilman Laybourne. It's right now, I've got a preliminary set of plans. That's about where it's at. I wasn't 100% sure where the funding was going to come out of for that, sir. So that's why it hasn't moved any further right now. I do have a small project for next summer, which is simply the dredging and clean out, but we've got some other components before it can actually be open. That part I have funded. I guess I've walked myself into a corner. So first stage is the cleanup, which is going to take place next year. And second stage is the long-term, getting it open to the public with improving the safety measures.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, any further questions? What was that? Any further comments or questions from committee? Comments or questions? Hearing none, we have no further business. Thank you, gentlemen, for presenting. And I guess we're adjourned.
Thank you, sir.